And again, these are all things that you would be doing and that would take you a very, very long time. This can get you down the path. Remember, it is not an endpoint. It's a starting point. It's a partner, not a solution. It's coming along and helping you.
Welcome to the BJU Press Teacher Edition podcast, where Christian educators are encouraged and inspired as we bring you interviews, practical ideas, strategies, and answer your questions about teaching in today's culture. And here's your host, Jenny Copeland.
It's time for another episode on the Teacher Edition podcast. We're glad that you are here. We're continuing our Cyber Sense mini-series about AI, generative AI specifically. Before we unpack today's topic, let me remind you to go check out our website, teachereditionpodcast.com, to learn more about the show, sign up for our newsletter, and also to submit your questions for upcoming episodes. You can also find us on social media. We are Teacher Edition Pod on Instagram and TikTok, as well as Teacher Edition Podcast on Facebook. We're also on YouTube as Teacher Edition Podcast, where you can watch these episodes if you would like. I know I say it often, but let me encourage you to share this show with other educators. Of course, we have covered many topics over the past couple of years, but so many educators are looking for a brief overview and some insights on AI. It's a huge topic. It can be hard to know where to start. And we're hoping that these short segments will at least lay some groundwork to give you that basic exposure of what AI is. So share this out and let's help each other. Let's help other educators teach and lead with more understanding in this area. So in episode 1 of this mini-series, where we're taking a brief break from our normal interview format, we talked about AI terms that we hear floating around. We also talked generally about how AI works. In episode 2, we looked at myths, misconceptions, and our mindset towards AI. Today, I would like to whet your appetite for some of what AI can do for you, but then also balance that with some cautions about AI. Let's start with some benefits of AI, what it can do for you. And know that I'm saying AI, but I'm mainly referring to generative AI specifically. So we could do podcasts for years and never scratch the surface. And honestly, each week, the last week's would be outdated. AI is changing and growing and improving so rapidly. But let's just do a high flyover just to get you thinking about some things that AI can do for you as a teacher. Okay? So first, I want to start out with some administrative type tasks. And you say, well, I'm not an administrator, I'm a teacher. Well, every day, teachers do administrative tasks. We have lots of paperwork to do. We have scheduling. We have things data to collect. So those are the things we want to look at. So how about reducing the time on those routine tasks? This could be something like scheduling, drafting, or reviewing communications. Maybe you do related art schedules. Maybe you love doing schedules. Some people like that. Some people can sit and look and think, I just need to rearrange my day and I can't figure out how this can work. Well, guess what? AI does schedules. It can be a starting point on your communication. Probably when I said drafting or reviewing communication, some of you went, oh, she would use AI to write an email? Well, have you ever had a situation where you had to write a really tricky email or you just really weren't sure how to start something and you ran next door to the teachers in the classroom next door and said, okay, I have to write an email to this parent. How do I get started? Like, where do I even start with this? And after an hour or two and maybe a trip to Starbucks and a few other sidetracks, you come up with maybe the first sentence or two to get you started. You can go to AI. And by the way, always protect what we call PII, personally identifiable information. So I'm not going to put in there that I have a third grade 10-year-old student named John Smith who will not sit in a seat and go on. No, I'm not wanting to give any information that identifies them as a student, where they go to school, things like that. Obviously, what I feed in there, what questions I ask, I want them to be very, very general. But I can put in the situation and AI can get me started. It can give me some talking points, some things to think through, and then it is up to me to bring what is best to the table. I'm the one who's passing judgment on it. I'm not just copying and pasting it. That would not be an appropriate use. Okay, so those are some of those routine tasks. What about analyzing data? Reviewing things, maybe you have feedback that's come back to you. You can analyze that. Looking at attendance records. It seems our students aren't here very often on Mondays, or it seems by our grades that my students struggle on Fridays? What can I do to help that? All those different things that we would sit and work at could be done within seconds by AI. We can use AI to summarize things. Reading you need to do, meeting notes, long documents. AI does a great job at summarizing, making an FAQ out of something. I have an example there for you, enhancing communication. It can translate documents. It can create support documents. It could create an FAQ from your website. Again, you can import, you can give it documentation, and it can read that and then create from there. And again, these are all things that you would be doing and that would take you a very, very long time to get there. This can get you down the path. Remember, it is not an endpoint. It's a starting point. It's a partner, not a solution. It's coming along and helping you. Again, analyzing scores, something that can take a long time, but putting those in with maybe just a student number or animal names or something like that so that the names of those students aren't identifiable, it can analyze that for you quickly. The thing I want you to remember and notice in all of these is that there is a theme. It's a starting point, not an end. You are the moral checkpoint. And that's where we cannot hand that off to AI. You are still the person who makes it meaningful. It can help you get started on an email, but you are the person who adds the heart. You're the person who adds the meaning and that personal element. And ultimately, you decide what is best. It is not just because AI says it, you have to do it. No, it's not that. It's you who brings the judgment to the table on that. Okay, let's talk about what about for teachers. Now, you may say, well, I'm being paid to work. Is this okay? Yes. This is a tool, and I will talk more about that in one of the episodes, but this is something that can allow you to focus your energy where it needs to be, on what only you can do. If this can help you do your schedule for tomorrow so you can pour more time into that email to that parent or writing feedback on, essays or giving feedback on writing assignments, whatever it may be, then this is a tool that you can use. Again, think of it like an intern. I'm here. I can help. I can do it. Can I do that? Can I give the spelling test? Can I grade those assignments? Can I? And you have to choose what is best and what would be the most helpful. So here's some ideas for teachers. Generating alternate lesson plans. Okay, so let's say that you have a lesson plan and you think, you know what? I think I want to do this outside. So you could sit for 2 hours and think, okay, how could we take this outside? What could I use? What could I do? Or you could say to AI, I have this lesson on such and such. I would like to do this outside collaboratively with a 10-question assessment at the end. And it's going to give you those ideas. Do you have to use all of them? No. Will it give you some that you think, what? I would never do that. Of course it will. But that's where you're working with that prompt. And we're going to definitely talk about that in an upcoming episode. How about generating newsletter content? Do you ever struggle to think of a creative way to do this, to communicate this in your newsletter? Let AI help you. How about creating a survey? Coming up with survey questions can be tricky, but you know what? We need that feedback. We need to see what our people are thinking, to hear their feedback on that. It can help you with questions and even formatting it. How about drafting communications? Again, we mentioned that you're going to be the one who adds the personalization to that. Creating slideshows. Did you know AI can do that for you? Yes. You can put in the information that you need made into a slideshow, and it will create that for you. Are you going to need to tweak it? Of course you will. Are you going to want to add things to it? Yes, absolutely. But again, if it saved you a half hour or an hour by getting the basic information onto slides, then you have a tool that allows you to save time in that area so you can move on to other areas. How about streamlining scheduling and planning? Like we said, even redoing a day. So you find out tomorrow you're going to have a pep rally and all your day needs to kind of be condensed. Feed in your regular schedule. Say that I need the same basic amounts of time, the ratio of time for each of those classes, but I'm no longer available from 2 to 3. Let it help you get started down that path. Generating reports based on data. So you're looking for maybe groups you need to create or trends can help you with all of that. Here's some more. How about creating differentiated instruction? That's something we all want to do. It's something that's so important to do, but it can be tricky to come up with, and it's very time-consuming at times. So that personalized learning. For example, some of you may look at your history book and you think, I really want to spend more time on our state, or maybe even by state requirements, you need to have a unit about your state. But whatever curriculum you use, hopefully use BJU Press, but whatever you're using, it doesn't really have something that focuses just on your state other than the overview it does of all the states. AI can help you with that. Maybe your students are really interested in a certain sport or an inventor or an author. AI can help you create that extension activity or that differentiated instruction. It can help level things for different students' needs as well. It can help you write IEPs or intervention plans. You say, oh, those are official documents. I don't know if I'd want to use what AI puts out. Well, you know what? AI has been trained on millions and millions of pieces of data, including things that have to do with intervention plans, and can help you down that path. Kind of along that same line is how to apply accommodations at your school. So in your classroom, a student is assigned to your room and comes with a list of accommodations. And we've all been there. You look at the list and think, how am I going to make that happen in my class? Well, AI can give you some ideas of how to make that happen successfully. Even creating study materials, practice tests, flashcards, web quests, all those fun things that we love to do, but again, often run out of time to create. And we know how it is to spend 3 hours creating something and then the students finish it in 30 seconds. And you think, oh, I spent so much time on that and now it's over. Well, you know what? You can help level off some of that investment of time by allowing AI to be your assistant, to be your intern for that. Let's get a little bit more specific, okay? So creating assessments or review questions. You want to do a review game. You want to do a practice test. AI can help with that. Creating assessments from a video. I love this. This is an amazing feature that's in many different tools where it actually reads the captions or the transcripts of the video and creates questions about that video. We are in a culture where our students are just inundated with screens and stimuli, technology. So often when we play a video or have them watch a video, they just kind of, glaze over because they see screens all the time. What a great way to keep them interacting with that. That does not mean that you should skip watching the video. Obviously, you still want to do that, but this can get you down that path a little further in creating those assessments from the video. How about study guides? Again, those often take a lot of time to create. You can put in the information of what you are studying and have it create it for you, and then you just tweak it. It's much quicker to tweak than to build from scratch. Generating examples. So again, you can, you teach a math concept and then, okay, well, let me give you some examples. And thinking of them can take forever. And then you go to looking them up. And again, you burned a lot of time. This is a great way to allow AI to help. Identifying vocab or difficult words in a text. You can share which book you're reading, maybe which poem, can pull those out for you, create definitions. Extension activities, perhaps you just finished a unit. Now you want to do something special to wrap up that unit, a special activity. Let it help. Depth of knowledge, leveled questions, those comprehension questions, that takes a lot of work to create. And again, I'm not saying we should never work, but this can come along as your assistant. Then creating rubrics, and everywhere that I mentioned that AI can help with rubrics, there's always one who says, but I love making rubrics. More power to you. You are welcome to continue to make your rubrics. But for everyone else who does not enjoy making rubrics, this is a great option. It makes the format for you. It can fill in the leveling, and you're just feeding it the specifics of what you need to create that rubric. Okay, now we have a number of teachers who say, okay, I want to use AI in my classroom. How can I do that? And it can be tricky to think of how to do that without it feeling contrived and feel like I'm only using this for the sake of using AI. Well, here's a few examples. How about hold a debate? So you could either hold a debate with AI and you're telling it, okay, you are going to be this side of the debate. I'm going to be this side of this topic. You could also have it create a script. So this is something I've heard of being done, like even you could create a script between evolutionists and creationists. And the students, you could take time and research what the evolutionists believe and how they would debate it and what dialogue would be there. Or you can also include AI and have it do some of the work for you as the students learn about those in a unique way. Another option, playing 20 questions. Okay, this is our topic. This is what we just studied. Let's play 20 questions. You can actually interact with AI that way. Generate and perform a script. Maybe mix things up for a day instead of just reading a story that you're working on or reading a chapter in a novel you're working on. Have AI create it for you as a script, maybe a reader's theater, and have the students interact that way. Impersonate a historical character. I've seen this done many times, and it's fantastic. So you're basically telling AI, you are Abraham Lincoln, and we would like to ask you some questions. And it's pulling from that information from history. And just what a fun way for the students to learn, kind of almost like they're interviewing Abraham Lincoln. And right along with that, my next idea is conducting an interview. So it can create the script for you, or you can actually just interact that way with AI. Exploring what-if scenarios. What if the American Revolution had failed? Have you ever thought of that? And again, this is challenging your students to think deeper, not just, okay, it happened and this is how we live now. What if the roles had been changed? What if the result had been different? And AI can help you with that. What would our map possibly look like? What language would we be speaking? What might we be eating? And as it gives those responses, then it gives you discussion points, and then you can do follow-up questions. You almost have this conversation going with AI, who has this amazing background, of the data set is huge on that. Again, you're always wanting to exercise critical thinking and judgment, and some things may pop up and you think, nah, I don't think so. What a great opportunity for you to discuss that with your students. Creating an interactive map. You can map out a journey of someone that you're learning about. Maybe you create a fake trip that you could go on as a class, hitting the main points in a state that you just studied. It can create all of that for you. How about going more specifically into a subject, such as reading? So what would you do in preparing for that class that maybe AI could help you with? So you could determine the reading level of a text, okay? Now, I also want to preface this of you want to be really careful with copyright. So as you're feeding things into these different platforms, remember, these are being used, and you definitely don't want to feed in something that's not yours. So you want to be really careful as you look at different books or whichever materials from whichever publisher you use. You want to be really careful about that. This is really a major topic, I guess, in our court system right now, is how to deal with this. Where things are coming from, who can use what, who has used things that maybe they didn't have permission for. All this is going on. Of course, as Christians, we have God's word, we have God's standard as our foundation, and we want to choose the highest level. We want to be above reproach on that. We want to choose the highest standard. So I want to be really careful about that. Even as you interact with your colleagues, just encouraging them, be careful what you feed in. Yes, protect personal information, but also be careful of who owns that and what you are feeding into that platform. But many texts, you can just ask about it because it has been used in one way or another. You could ask it to rewrite text. Maybe you wrote something, you realize they didn't really understand what I wrote. You could put that back in. Summarizing text, creating comprehension questions. We talked about that, but that's big in reading, takes time there. Pulling main points, generating vocab words and definitions, even an extension activity from a story. So many times we do that and it's kind of like, all right, story's done. We close the book and we're done. Is there something more that we can do with that? What about in writing? Do any of you struggle with coming up with writing prompts? I remember when I was teaching, just thinking of things that would be creative, that they would enjoy on age level. You can do that. I have a 6th grade class. We are studying about, and you fill in the blank right now. I would like them to do a writing assignment. Could you give me 20 different writing prompt ideas? It's going to give that to you. And then, of course, you can work with it to get exactly what you need. Generating ping pong stories where you write some, it writes some, and back and forth like that. It's amazing the engagement level and how that goes up as students get to interact in that way. Creating illustrations for student writing. This is a great way to practice adjectives. So if they're writing about something, maybe about an animal, and I know that's an elementary example, but you can, convert this into the upper levels as well. They've written about something, and then have them also write out a description of that. And you as a teacher, if the students are too young to use AI, and we will talk about the age requirements as well, you can feed that into AI. So my dinosaur is purple with blue eyes and a black dot on its head. It's tall, and it's all those adjectives in there, and then it creates that image for you. And how fun to display that with their student work. The students can receive feedback on their writing. So you can have them do that initial, and when you would typically conference with them, and you have 20 students and you're trying to figure out how to do that in 50 minutes, and they all get 1.52 minutes, What about if you took that and you fed that in, of course, without their information, and have it give feedback? And you know what? They can take that. It's just another way for them to give feedback. And that's actually been found to be really successful, giving them just that beginning level. Because why do we grade? We grade for growth. And so we go through and assess that. They're going to get that feedback. Oh, we have some fragments there. We have some issues with punctuation. And it gives them something that maybe you couldn't spend 10 minutes with them, but they have that initial piece of feedback. Yes, you are still going to spend time with them. You are still going to work with them individually, but it can help you do some of that, especially on that beginning level there. Creating good and bad examples for evaluation. This is another thing that I would spend so much time on, writing a letter that's done incorrectly. And that could easily take you an hour to come up with, and they finish it in 10 seconds. They have it all corrected. They love the activity. It's fun to do something reverse instead of always writing it. Now we're going to correct it. But those types of things can take a while to create. So another way that you can use that. So those are just a few examples of how you could use that as a teacher. What about from the student side? So I mentioned that it can be a personal assistant to you as a teacher. It can also be a personal tutor for our students. We're going to actually take an episode and talk more about this, but let's talk about just some general examples of how this could be used. It can be used to help generate review questions for them. Students are always asking for that. Can we review? Can we play a game? Could we, take a practice test? Or you have students who are struggling and they just need more and more practice. And again, that can take a lot of time to create. So there are just some huge possibilities for support in using AI in this way. Checking their understanding. So this could be something where if they're old enough, they can actually interact with it. If you have the right tools, which we're going to talk about in an upcoming episode, they can use those tools to go in and check, okay, this is what I understand about the periodic table. Can you quiz me? And they can actually check the understanding of how they are doing. Explaining concepts at any depth. I'm in 10th grade. Could you explain this as you would to a 5th grader? That's kind of how I needed some of those topics. And just bring it down a few notches, help me understand it at a more basic level, and then I can scaffold from there. Breaking down skills step by step, escalating knowledge. So taking it next step, and then getting feedback on their work, that check along the way. How am I doing getting that feedback? So these are just a teeny sampling of the ways that AI can be used in education. Again, we're going to get hands-on in some of the future sessions, but I also want you to be aware of the risks, of the cautions. Because you say, oh, wow, this sounds awesome. That's amazing. There's so many things it can do. Well, it's no secret that there have been issues in AI, right? Especially in education. And part of having knowledge about a topic is having that balance, not just all the positives, but also being knowledgeable of where we might need to have caution, where we might need to exercise concern in some areas. We don't just want to toss that part out of it because we need to respond wisely and in a God-honoring way. So at high level, as we wrap up this episode, let's talk about some cautions about AI. So first of all, the first one is misinformation. So results are based on data. And guess what? AI can get it wrong. We talked about those hallucinations, but it can be outdated. Some of these platforms, and they're getting better at this, but especially when they were first released, they were trained on data only up to a certain date, up to 2021, up to 2023. Well, when you ask it a more current question, it may be pulling from outdated information. It could be non-existent information, like a hallucination where it just made up something illogical. It could just be odd, such as some of the AI tools that create images. Sometimes there's extra fingers or the text looks odd. It could just be an odd result. So we want to be careful about that misinformation. We also want to be careful about biased outputs. And I did mention this a little bit earlier. There can be bias towards certain groups of people. There have been reports of bias against certain learning disabilities, certain careers. And the way that bias works is sometimes it associates, different races with different professions and we just want to be really, really careful about that. So again, using that constant discernment when you're seeing those results, saying, is that really true? Is that not just the copy and paste like we're seeing often done, unfortunately, with AI? The next one, ethical concerns about copyright and consent. So when we look at that, the permission for that data, where is it coming from? So ethical concerns. So if this belongs to someone else and I'm using it, Is that ethical? Is it right for me to feed this in? Is it right for someone else to have fed that into this AI model? When we look at that, we want to make sure that there's right permission there. And this is another topic, again, like I said, that's being seen in our court system right now. This is hitting at various levels of corporations suing because they're finding their information in AI models and they did not give permission for it to be used. So again, we'll see how that all pans out. Very, very tricky for people to wade through at the legal end of this, but we'll definitely be watching that. And then privacy, data privacy. And this can be, what are they doing with your input? So when you put something in there, what is that being protected? Is it being used to train that model? Could it appear somewhere else? We have to be careful about that. And that kind of goes with the next one, which is lack of transparency. So when you look at these models, they often don't list their limitations. I remember when they first came out, it was just like, here is the response. And you kind of had to wade through it yourself. And people were just amazed that, even the math problems were wrong. How can it have all this other knowledge and can't do a math problem, which is very true. AI does struggle with math. But then they started adding the little sentence at the bottom that said, this can be inaccurate. Make sure to check the results. And I appreciate that they do that. But often there's not transparency about what the limitations are or the sources of where the information is coming from. So again, we just need to keep these things as a caution. It's not that we just throw out the tool, but it's something we want to have on our radar. The next one is impersonation of people. This is where I feel like AI tends to kind of push to cross over the line at times. It does feel very human. Of course, we deal with the issues of deep fakes and things like that, and I'm not even going to get into that. But this is somewhat tied to the next one, which is simulation of emotional relationships. And this is something we're seeing very frequently in schools, where students are creating that bond with their bot. They're becoming, their best friend is their bot. And Common Sense Media, if you read on their website, as they talk about this feature of AI, they label it as an unacceptable risk. And I love how they put that, because that is so true. Just so a student can use a tool, this is not right. Now, I've seen some tools where they actually mix up the personality of the bot. One day it kind of acts like this character, and sometimes it's a girl, and sometimes it might be a dog, or whatever. They mix it up. And some of those are silly, I get it. But what they're doing is trying to stop that. We are human. We have that natural bonding desire. And when something is talking to you as a human, that bond is created. And that can be very, very dangerous. I have a friend who's telling me how her high school students, as soon as they get out of class, they're talking to their bots. That's who they ask, what they should wear. And that's who they tell what happened at lunch and what friend was unkind. And they're getting advice from them. That is very, very dangerous. They are turning down the wise counsel of the humans in their life, the human counselors. They're losing that human connection. And that's a very, very dangerous line to cross. So we want to be really, really careful about that. All of these kind of come down to two basic statements that I want to leave you with in this episode. We need to be careful of an over-reliance on AI for creativity and critical thinking. AI is forcing us to make ethical, biblical choices. And we have to be careful. Again, it goes back to this balance. And when there's an over-reliance on, AI is going to do everything for me. It's going to be my creativity, and whatever it tells me, I go with it. We're throwing out critical thinking. We're throwing out that creativity that God has given us. Secondly, sacrificing or surrendering tasks that should be done by humans. Work is God-ordained. Sometimes we think, and Brian Smith talked about this in one of our podcast episodes, work is God-ordained. It's part of the creation mandate. Should we use tools that can support our work? Yes, absolutely. If it can help us use our time more wisely, if it can enhance our work, I am all for that. But when we are surrendering those tasks that we should be doing as humans, then we have crossed over that line. When we turn over our responsibilities, our decisions, our time, our thoughts to AI, then we are outside that appropriate use of the tool. So while we talked about a lot of benefits for teachers, I also want to put those cautions before you. Again, not so you just throw out the tool and walk away, but so that we can have that balance and we can be alert, that we can be aware, so that we can respond wisely. Okay, so today we covered some high-level ideas of what AI can do for you as an educator. We also talked about those cautions. We have laid a foundation of terminology, of processes, of clearing up some misconceptions, even identifying some areas where we need to be aware, where we need to be cautious. In our next episode, I want to jump in and start digging into how to use AI. We're going to look at practical ways to get the results that you are looking for and explore some of the tools that are currently highlighted in education. Stick with us. I think you're going to find these episodes very practical and helpful as you navigate AI personally, but also in your classroom. But it's time to wrap up today's episode. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you will plan to join us for the remaining episodes of this CyberSense mini-series. Just a reminder to go to teachereditionpodcast.com to learn more about the show and to submit your questions for upcoming episodes. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, follow us on social media. Now, it's time to get back to your day, but it's not just any day. Every day in the classroom is your day to impact and inspire through God's power and through His grace working in you. Now, go do what God has called you to do.